Hello, Coach Robert here. So today I was playing a game against a group of kids. The way it worked was they got to talk as a group and decide on their move, and then I would move in response. And it was just to check to make sure they were learning some of the principles. It wasn't really to see if they could beat me, but really just to see if they were learning some stuff. And the course of the game, they did really, really well. They developed their pieces. They got their king castled. They didn't really hang anything. But I want to show this game because of the way it ended. The game ended in one of the coolest checkmates that can ever happen. And it's so rare that I had to tell you guys about it. So the game ended in what's called a smothered mate. Okay, I have never gotten to actually do a smothered mate in a game until today. I was super excited. I had a tournament where I had a smothered mate possibility, but my opponent caught it at the last minute and stopped it. He had to trade a rook for a knight to stop it, but still, if he had just made any move other than what he did, I had the game won. But I was sad to miss that chance. I got to play it once against a computer, but that doesn't count. I've seen lots of kids do it because they didn't castle their king and their king was in the middle of the board, but this was the textbook smothered mate. So I'm going to go through this game pretty quick with you guys so you can see how it gets set up and see what the execution of a smothered mate looks like. Okay, so I let my kids that I was coaching have the white pieces. They started with the traditional e4. I was very proud of them. They decided to put a pawn in the center. I tell them this is one of the best moves you can make to start out a game. So I didn't want to get crazy with them, playing anything like a Caro-Kann or any sort of modern defense or anything like that. I just went ahead and played e5 to let them start. You just think normally about the game. They played bishop to c4. And they did that probably because they're thinking about targeting the f-pawn. I've talked to them about how the f-pawn is a weakness, but I have also taught them how to stop scholar's mate because they were thinking maybe if we get the queen out here, then we can get checkmate in 2 moves. Now they know better than to do that against me, but they played bishop. It's a good developing move. They're getting ready to castle. I just go ahead and bring my knight out, stops the queen from coming out. Oops. Prevents the queen from coming to either of these 2 squares. And so scholar's mate is no longer an option, right? Okay, so they continue to play. They push the pawn to d3, which is protecting their e4 pawn. Not a bad move. They've already got their light squared bishop out, so now it's okay to move this pawn. Now they're able to get their dark squared bishop out, so I was happy to see that. I went ahead and developed my bishop, getting ready to castle. They continue to develop with knight to f3, also attacking my pawn on e5. So I went ahead and defended that, and then we both castled. This was really good. This is the sort of stuff I want to see from the kids that I'm coaching, this normal development, getting the pieces out, getting your king safe in the corner. So they're doing great so far. Okay, so from here they go knight to c3, which is a good move. It again develops. Some other options would be something like moving the pawn to c3, getting ready to push the pawn to d4, something like this, or maybe getting the bishop out. Seeing that bishop was getting ready to possibly pin my knight, I went ahead and played h6. I think the kids thought I was listening to them as they discussed their move. I actually did not hear what they were saying, but apparently they had just been talking about moving their bishop to g5 and they thought I was cheating. I wasn't. They were doing a great job. I was trying not to listen to them. So they said, okay, well, they noticed that my bishop has this pin on their f-pawn. And so they thought maybe we can do something about that. And they played knight to a4. That's a really good move. So I decided if you're going to take my bishop, I didn't really want to give up on the pin. I scooted my bishop back just because if they took the bishop, then I could, if they take the bishop, I can, come on, draw my arrows there. I could take back with a pawn, and then I've got an open line with my rook. Instead, they go ahead and play c3, which is another good move. And I went ahead and play a4. So my idea here is to possibly move my bishop, tuck it back here, so I can maintain that pin on the f-pawn, but also to push this pawn forward and potentially fork their knight and their bishop. I thought that would be kind of sneaky, an opportunity to teach them more about forks. So what they did in the game was to move queen b3. Now this is really the first move that I would say wasn't a good move. I understand what they're doing, and I think it's a decent idea. They're setting up this battery on the f-pawn. But the queen's not really going to do much there. It doesn't really have any other targets, and it becomes a target itself. And even that battery, it's just not going to work as long as the rook is sitting here. So I decided I was going to go ahead and target the queen, with the idea if I target the queen and the bishop, maybe I can create a weakness by making some double pawns. It might have been best just to go ahead and tuck away my bishop and fork, but I thought that'd be a little too nasty. So I did this. They moved their queen out of the way, and then I traded my knight for the bishop to create the double pawns there on the c file. At this point, I do go ahead and tuck my bishop back, and I heard them talking at this point about how they did not like this pin on the f-pawn. So they actually recognized that there was a pin there. I was really proud of them at this point because they've been playing such a good game and they're seeing what I'm doing. They're able to think about it and think about how do we counteract it. They decided they wanted to counteract by bringing their bishop to e3. Not bad. Better might have been just to go ahead and push this pawn to c5, which would have been protected by the knight and the queen. So I'm okay with this because I can then trade off the bishops and create a second set of double pawns. So we've got double pawns on the c file, we've got double pawns on the e file, which is also a pawn island, and the king's a little bit less secure. So we both have hanging e pawns, so I go ahead and grab theirs, and they grab mine. Now, probably better would for me to still go ahead and push the b pawn, and because once we trade off pawns here, I'd have a pawn attacking their knight, which is pinned to their queen. And so I probably would have picked up the knight, but at this point, rather than doing that, I recognize I'm starting to sense that there may be a chance for a smothered mate. My knight's in the right position, my queen might be able to get in, and even if I don't get the smother mate, I realize that with a push of the pawn, I can get my bishop in line to come out, the queen in line to come out, and I'm going to have a pretty strong attack over here on this king side. So with thinking about getting my bishop out, I go ahead and move d6. The knight retreats back to f3, and then I bring bishop over to g4 because now I'm thinking I have the chance to completely open things up over here. And they decided to bring the knight over to d4 rather than letting me exchange it. Probably leaving the knight there would have been best. But when that knight moved, now I saw I definitely had the chance for a good attack. I bring the queen over. And at this point, they recognize that I've got all of these attacking pieces over here on the king side, and they've got a queen and a knight and a rook all lined up on the wall on the queen side. But they did not see what I had planned because it's so hard to see a smother mate. But I'm already thinking of this. I'm waiting to see what they're going to do. I don't tell them anything. I don't try to influence their decision. I just stay quiet to see what they do. And they move queen b3. And that pretty much sealed the deal. They had the right idea. They recognized that their pieces were all over on the queen side and they needed to move them over if they were going to have any chance to withstand the attack. But it really just was too late. So I capture the pawn on e3. Okay. So they have some chance to get out of this smother mate, but the chances are running low. Okay. They only have two options. They can block with the rook or move over with the king. Well, Their thought was, well, if we block with the rook, then the queen's just going to take the rook, and that's no good. So they move the king over. Okay, here it comes. So I bring the knight to check. Again, this is their last chance. They can take the knight, and I take the queen, or they move king g1, and I finally get the smother mate I'd always wanted. So if you have not seen a smother mate before, or if you think you can figure it out, why don't you pause the video, see if you can find the next sequence of moves, because the rest of the moves are forced. At this point, I have a forced smother mate available. If you've never seen a smother mate before, you're about to be in for a treat. Okay, so you ready to go? Next move is knight to h3 double check. I am checking with the queen, and I'm checking with the knight. And when you are in double check, you have to move the king. There is no way you can capture two pieces at once. So C is not a possibility. You can't protect checks from two different directions at once, and you can't protect a check from a knight anyways. So P is not a possibility. So if you're thinking of our CPR, capture, protect, retreat, the only option is retreat. The king cannot move to F2. The king has to move to H1. So you may be thinking, okay, well, then what's the follow-up, right? Well, here's the nasty move, is you sacrifice the queen on G1. And that's why the knight had to be on H3. See, the knight's actually guarding the queen. So the king can't take the queen. But the rook can. The problem was that rook was guarding the F2 square, and the rook on G1 now completely encloses the king. He cannot move. So all I have to do is put him in check with a knight, and it is checkmate. And that is the smother mate. And that was like a textbook smother mate right there, where you bring your knight from F2 to H3, sack the queen on G1. I mean, that was perfect. That was exactly what you want to see for a smother mate. The kids should not feel bad about this. This is such a hard checkmate to spot in advance. And man, they played so good for how much they've learned. So I was really proud of them, and I don't want them to be discouraged by this performance, but hopefully they can look at it and learn about a new checkmate that we hadn't really talked about before in our chess lessons. And so hopefully you've enjoyed this and have learned something as well. This was a game with good opening principles, developing, controlling the center, casting the king, great ideas on attacks on the f-pawn, and it just had the spectacular smother mate ending. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again next time.